May 27, 1940. Dunkirk, France. Lieutenant John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, known to his men as Mad Jack, stood on the beach at Dunkirk watching the British Army evacuate across the English Channel. Around him, hundreds of thousands of soldiers waited in lines stretching into the surf, hoping to board ships before the German Wehrmacht closed the trap. The air shook with artillery fire. Luftwaffe Stuka screamed overhead, bombing the beaches and strafing the evacuation ships. Most soldiers carried rifles. Some had pistols. A few had managed to salvage machine guns from the retreat. Jack Churchill carried a Scottish broadsword strapped to his waist, a longbow slung across his back, and a set of bagpipes under his arm. He had killed a German soldier with that longbow just days earlier in France, the last confirmed longbow kill in the history of warfare. Now, as the British Army retreated in chaos from the greatest military disaster in its modern history, Mad Jack stood on the beach playing his bagpipes, the defiant wail of "We no come back again" rising above the explosions. A fellow officer asked him, "Churchill, have you lost your mind? Put those damn pipes away." Jack replied, "I'll stop playing when the Germans stop shooting." This is the story of Mad Jack Churchill, the British commando who fought World War II with a sword, a longbow, and bagpipes. The man who charged machine gun nests playing Scottish war tunes. The officer who captured 42 German soldiers with sword alone. The warrior who escaped from a Nazi concentration camp by walking through an electrified fence. The eccentric who complained that America's atomic bombs had spoiled the war by ending it too soon. This is the story of the last man to kill an enemy with a longbow in battle. The only British soldier in World War II to carry a sword and bagpipes into combat, and perhaps the most fearlessly insane warrior the 20th century ever produced. This is the story of Mad Jack Churchill, the man who brought medieval warfare to the modern battlefield, and somehow survived when everyone around him died. To understand Mad Jack Churchill, you must understand that he was born eccentric, raised eccentric, and spent his entire life refusing to be anything but eccentric. John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill was born on September 16, 1906, in Colombo, Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, though he spent most of his early childhood in Hong Kong. His father, Alec Fleming Churchill, was a British civil servant working in the colonial administration. The Churchill family was upper class, well-educated, and deeply patriotic. They were distantly related to Winston Churchill, though Jack never made much of the connection. Jack was the eldest of four brothers, and from childhood, he displayed two defining characteristics: absolute fearlessness and a complete disregard for social convention. As a boy in Hong Kong, Jack learned to ride horses before he could properly walk. He learned to fence at age 6. He learned archery at age 8. While other British children in the colony attended garden parties and learned proper manners, Jack was climbing trees, exploring the Chinese districts, and getting into fistfights with local boys twice his age. His family returned to England when Jack was a teenager. He attended King William's College on the Isle of Man, a traditional British boarding school known for producing military officers and civil servants. Jack hated every minute of it. He found the rules suffocating, the discipline arbitrary, and the other students boring. But he excelled at two things: sports and drama. Jack joined the school's archery club and quickly became the best archer anyone had ever seen. He had natural talent, steady hands, perfect eyesight, and intuitive understanding of trajectories. But more importantly, he practiced obsessively. By age 16, he could hit a target at 100 yards with a longbow. By 18, he could split an arrow Robin Hood style, hitting his own arrow with a second arrow. He also discovered a love for bagpipes. The school had a pipe band, and Jack taught himself to play. He wasn't particularly good at first. Bagpipes are notoriously difficult instruments, but Jack had a stubborn refusal to quit. Within a year, he was the best piper in the school. Within 2 years, he was competing in national competitions. In 1926, at age 20, Jack enrolled in the Royal Military College, Sandhurst, Britain's premier military academy, the equivalent of West Point or St. Cyr. Sandhurst trained the officers who would lead the British Army. The curriculum was rigorous: tactics, strategy, weapons training, leadership, horsemanship, and endless drill. Jack Churchill was a model cadet in some ways and a nightmare in others. He excelled at physical training. He was fast, strong, and fearless. He was an expert marksman with rifles and pistols. He was brilliant at tactics. He could read terrain, anticipate enemy movements, and devise creative solutions to military problems. But he also drove his instructors insane. He questioned orders. He ignored regulations he thought were stupid. He showed up to formations carrying a sword, which wasn't standard issue, and refused to remove it. When asked why he carried a sword, he replied, "Any officer who goes into action without a sword is improperly dressed." Despite his eccentricities, Jack graduated from Sandhurst in 1926 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Manchester Regiment. He was 20 years old, armed with a sword and a commission, and ready to serve the British Empire. But Jack Churchill didn't stay in the army. In 1936, after 10 years of peacetime military service in India and Burma, years that consisted mostly of garrison duty, training exercises, and bureaucratic tedium, Jack resigned his commission and left the army. Why? Because he was bored. There were no wars to fight. The British Empire was at peace. Jack's duties consisted of paperwork, inspections, and training soldiers for a war that might never come. He wanted adventure, excitement, something more than routine. So Jack Churchill became an actor. He moved to London and began auditioning for film roles. He had the looks, tall, handsome, athletic, and he had presence. He landed a small role in The Thief of Baghdad, 1940, a fantasy adventure film. He worked as a male model. He performed in theater productions. But Jack's real passion was archery. In 1939, he represented Great Britain at the World Archery Championships. He didn't win, he came in second, but he impressed everyone with his skill and his unconventional style. While other archers used modern compound bows and precision sights, Jack used a traditional English longbow with no sights, just like medieval archers. He argued that longbows were more elegant, more challenging, and more British. Jack also took up surfing, highly unusual for a British man in the 1930s. He traveled California and learned to ride waves. He became obsessed with the sport and brought it back to England, becoming one of the first people to surf British waters. And he rode a motorcycle across India, just for fun, solo, through mountain passes and bandit country. When asked why, he said, because it was there. By 1939, Jack Churchill was living an unconventional life as an actor, model, champion archer, and adventurer. He had left the military behind. Then Germany invaded Poland. On September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. Jack Churchill immediately re-enlisted in the British Army. Not because he was particularly political. He didn't care much about ideology or geopolitics. He re-enlisted because there was finally going to be a war, and Jack Churchill loved war. He later admitted, "I always felt that the second best time of my life was during the war. The best was playing bagpipes and shooting arrows." Jack was recommissioned as a lieutenant in the Manchester Regiment and sent to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force, BEF. The BEF consisted of about 150,000 British soldiers sent to defend France against German invasion. In May 1940, Germany launched Fall Gelb, the invasion of France and the Low Countries. Panzer Division smashed through the Ardennes Forest, bypassing the Maginot Line, and drove toward the English Channel. The French army collapsed. The BF retreated toward Dunkirk, the only port still in British hands. Jack Churchill's unit was part of the fighting retreat. The British were outnumbered, outgunned, and being pushed back by superior German forces. On May 27, 1940, somewhere in northern France, Jack's platoon encountered a German patrol. The Germans were advancing cautiously through a village, using buildings for cover. Jack Churchill stood up, drew an arrow from his quiver, knocked it to his longbow, drew back the string, and fired. The arrow hit a German soldier in the chest. The soldier fell, dead before he hit the ground. Jack knocked another arrow. The Germans, confused about where the attack was coming from, who the hell uses arrows in 1940, scattered. Jack's platoon opened fire with rifles, killing several more Germans and forcing the rest to retreat. It was the last confirmed kill with a longbow in the history of warfare, a medieval weapon used in a 20th century battle. Jack later said, "In my opinion, any officer who goes into action without a sword is improperly dressed. The longbow is just good sense." Days later, Jack was evacuated from Dunkirk along with 338,000 other British and French soldiers. Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of Dunkirk, was a strategic disaster but a tactical miracle. The British army had been saved, but it had lost most of its equipment. Britain now stood alone against Nazi Germany. Jack Churchill, standing on the beach at Dunkirk, playing his bagpipes while German artillery fell around him, decided that the regular army was too boring. He wanted to join a unit that did something interesting. He volunteered for the Commandos. The British Commandos were special operations units created in 1940 specifically for raiding operations against German-occupied Europe. Winston Churchill, no relation to Jack, had ordered their creation, saying, "We must strike back. Commandos should be used to keep the Germans guessing, to create uncertainty, to tie down German forces." Commando training was brutal. Volunteers trained in Scotland in harsh conditions, mountains, cold weather, live-fire exercises. They learned amphibious assault, demolitions, hand-to-hand combat, and silent killing. The washout rate was over 50%. Jack Churchill loved every minute of it. He excelled at everything. He could march farther, climb faster, and fight harder than almost anyone. But what set him apart was his weapons. He still carried his sword and his longbow. When asked why he brought medieval weapons to commando training, he said, "Because they work." In December 1941, Jack participated in Operation Archery, a commando raid on the Norwegian island of Vagsøy. The objective was to destroy German fish oil factories. Fish oil was used in explosives, kill German soldiers, and capture intelligence. The raid began before dawn. Commandos landed from assault boats and stormed the German positions. Jack Churchill led the charge onto the beach playing March of the Cameramen on his bagpipes, his sword drawn, arrows in his quiver. The Germans, waking to the sound of bagpipes and seeing a British officer charging with sword, thought they were hallucinating. Jack killed several Germans with his sword. He captured a German officer and several soldiers, forcing them to surrender at sword point. When a German machine gun opened fire from a building, Jack calmly took cover, drew his longbow, and shot an arrow through the window. The machine gun stopped firing. By the end of the raid, Jack had personally captured 42 German soldiers and killed at least 3 with his sword. He was wounded by a grenade fragment, but refused evacuation until the mission was complete. The Vagsøy raid was a success. The factories were destroyed, dozens of Germans killed or captured, and British morale boosted by proof that commandos could strike German-occupied Europe. Jack Churchill received the Military Cross for his actions. The citation read, "For coolness and courage under fire and for inspiring leadership." But what Jack remembered most was charging a German position, playing bagpipes. He said later, "I don't think the Germans knew what to make of it. Half of them surrendered out of confusion." By 1943, Jack Churchill had been promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of No. 2 Commando. He was 36 years old, a veteran of multiple raids, and had a reputation as the most fearless and possibly insane officer in the British Army. In July 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. Over 150,000 Allied troops landed on the southern coast of Sicily in the largest amphibious operation of the war up to that point. Jack Churchill's No. 2 Commando was tasked with capturing a beach near the town of Catania. The beach was defended by Italian and German troops with machine guns, mortars, and artillery. At dawn on July 10th, 1943, Jack Churchill stood in the lead assault boat as it approached the beach. He was wearing his sword, carrying his longbow, though he left most of his arrows behind, too bulky, and holding his bagpipes. As the boat hit the beach, Jack leaped out, waded to the surf, and charged up the beach playing Highland Laddie on his bagpipes. His commandos followed, screaming and firing as they ran. The Italian defenders, shocked by the sight of a British officer charging with bagpipes and a sword, panicked. Some surrendered immediately. Others fled. By the time Jack reached the first offensive position, it was abandoned. No. 2 Commando secured the beach with relatively light casualties. Jack's unorthodox tactics, charging while playing bagpipes, had so unnerved the defenders that many didn't even try to fight. Sicily was conquered by mid-August. The Allies had a foothold in Europe. In September 1943, the Allies invaded mainland Italy at Salerno, south of Naples. The landing was opposed by German forces under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. The battle for Salerno was brutal. The Germans nearly pushed the Allies back into the sea. Jack Churchill and No. 2 Commando were sent to capture a German observation post on a hilltop overlooking the landing beaches. The post was defended by about 50 German soldiers with machine guns. A conventional assault would have been suicidal, attacking uphill against entrenched machine guns. Jack decided to do something unconventional. At night, he took a small patrol, 6 men, and infiltrated German lines. They moved silently through the hills, avoiding German patrols, until they reached the observation post. Jack drew his sword, signaled his men, and charged. The Germans were completely surprised. Jack killed the first sentry with his sword before the man could raise an alarm. His men stormed the bunker, capturing Germans before they could react. Within minutes, The observation post was captured. Jack had 42 German prisoners again. He seemed to have a talent for capturing exactly 42 Germans. But now Jack had a problem. He was deep behind German lines with 6 men and 42 prisoners. Jack's solution: he ordered the prisoners to carry their own wounded, formed them into a column, and marched them back through German lines to Allied positions. German patrols saw the column and assumed it was a German unit moving prisoners to a rear area. No one challenged them. Jack marched 42 German prisoners directly through German lines in broad daylight and delivered them to Allied headquarters. When asked how he'd done it, Jack said, "I told them if they tried to escape, I'd stab them. Germans are very obedient when you speak firmly." For this action, Jack received the Distinguished Service Order, DSO, one of Britain's highest military decorations. By 1944, Jack Churchill had become a legend in the British Commandos. His reputation preceded him. The mad officer who carried a sword and bagpipes, who charged machine guns playing music, who captured Germans with medieval weapons. In May 1944, Jack was sent to Yugoslavia to assist Josip Broz Tito's communist partisans who were fighting German occupation forces. The mission was part of a broader Allied effort to tie down German divisions in the Balkans. Jack commanded a force of British commandos and Yugoslav partisans. Their objective was to raid German positions, disrupt supply lines, and gather intelligence. On the night of May 14, 1944, Jack led a raid on a German-held island in the Adriatic. The plan was to land by boat, assault the German garrison, destroy supplies, and evacuate before reinforcements arrived. The raid began well. Jack's force landed unopposed and advanced toward the German positions. Jack, as always, led from the front, sword drawn, bagpipes playing. Then everything went wrong. The Germans had been expecting the raid, either through intelligence or luck. As Jack's force entered the town, German machine guns opened fire from multiple positions. Mortars began falling. The British and partisans were caught in a kill zone. Jack's men fought desperately. They tried to withdraw, but were surrounded. One by one, Jack's commandos were killed or wounded. The partisans broke and fled. Within minutes, Jack's entire force had been wiped out. Jack Churchill found himself alone, surrounded by dead comrades, facing a German company closing in from all sides. He did what any sane person would do in that situation. He started playing his bagpipes. Jack sat on a stone wall, pipes in hand, playing "Will Ye No Come Back Again," a Scottish lament, while German soldiers cautiously approached. The Germans didn't shoot him. Why? According to German soldiers interviewed after the war, they thought the bagpipes were a signal to British reinforcements. They thought that if they killed the piper, a larger British force would attack. So they held their fire and waited. When Jack finished playing, he stood up, put down his bagpipes, and surrendered. He was taken prisoner. Jack Churchill was transported to Berlin for interrogation. The Germans were fascinated by him. Here was a British officer who fought with medieval weapons, played bagpipes in combat, and had survived dozens of raids. They wanted to know if he was insane or if this was some kind of British psychological warfare tactic. Jack refused to answer questions. He gave only his name, rank, and serial number, as required by the Geneva Convention. After several days of interrogation, the Germans decided Jack was a relative of Winston Churchill. He wasn't, except very distantly. They sent him to Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Berlin, where high-value prisoners were held. Sachsenhausen was a Nazi concentration camp, primarily for political prisoners, though it also held some POWs. Conditions were brutal. Prisoners were starved, beaten, and worked to death. Thousands died there. Jack Churchill lasted about 2 months before he escaped. In September 1944, Jack and a British RAF officer escaped from Sachsenhausen by crawling through a drainage tunnel under the camp's perimeter fence. They timed their escape during an Allied air raid, when guards were taking cover and searchlights were turned off. They crawled through sewage for several hundred meters, emerging outside the camp's perimeter. Then they ran. For 8 days, Jack and the RAF officer walked east through German-occupied territory. They avoided roads, traveled at night, stole food from farms, and hid during the day. Their plan was to reach the Baltic coast and steal a boat to Sweden. They made it about 150 miles before they were recaptured near the German-Polish border. Jack was sent to a POW camp in Austria, off Log 4C, better known as Colditz Castle. Colditz was a high-security camp for Allied officers who had escaped from other camps. The Germans figured if you escaped once, you'd try again, so they put all the escape artists in one heavily guarded castle. Jack Churchill fit right in. Colditz Castle was supposedly escape-proof. It sat on a cliff, surrounded by barbed wire, guard towers, and sentries. The German commandant boasted that no one had ever successfully escaped from Colditz. This wasn't true. Several had escaped, but the Germans didn't publicize it. Jack began planning his escape immediately. In April 1945, as Allied forces closed in on Germany, the German guards at Colditz began to panic. Some fled, others drank heavily. Discipline broke down. On the night of April 27, 1945, Jack Churchill simply walked out of Colditz. He climbed over a perimeter wall, dropped into a ditch, and walked away. Guards saw him but were too confused to stop him. Some thought he was a German officer checking defenses. Others didn't care. Germany was collapsing, and everyone knew the war was almost over. Jack walked south through Austria, heading toward Allied lines in Italy. He walked for days, avoiding German patrols, scavenging food, sleeping in barns. On May 4th, 1945, Jack encountered an American armored column advancing through Austria. He waved them down and identified himself as a British officer. The Americans didn't believe him at first. He looked like a vagrant, not a lieutenant colonel. But Jack spoke perfect English, knew military protocols, and had his identity tags. They transported him to Allied headquarters in Italy. Jack Churchill had escaped from 2 German prison camps and walked over 200 miles through enemy territory to freedom. When asked about his escapes, Jack said, "The Germans were very careless. They should have shot me when they had the chance." On May 8, 1945, Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. World War II in Europe was over. The Allies had won. Most soldiers celebrated. They could finally go home. The nightmare was over. Jack Churchill was furious. He later said, "If it wasn't for those damned Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. He wasn't joking. Jack loved war. He thrived in combat. He was bored in peacetime. The end of the war in Europe meant no more raids, no more battles, no more opportunities to charge enemy positions with a sword. But there was still one war going on, Japan. Jack immediately volunteered for transfer to the Pacific Theater. He wanted to fight in Burma against the Japanese. He arrived in India in August 1945, was assigned to a commando unit preparing for the invasion of Japan, and began training. Then, on August 6th and August 9th, 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered on August 15th, 1945. World War II was over. Jack Churchill was devastated. He later said, "The atomic bomb spoiled the war. The Japanese would have fought on for years. We could have had a proper war." He genuinely believed that ending the war quickly was a mistake. He wanted more combat. After World War II, Jack Churchill remained in the British Army. There were no more wars for him to fight in Europe, but the British Empire was busy with colonial conflicts. Jack served in Palestine during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, though he saw little action. He served as a parachute instructor, teaching soldiers to jump out of airplanes. In 1959, at age 53, Jack retired from the Army with the rank of lieutenant colonel. Most men would have settled into quiet retirement. Jack Churchill went surfing. He moved to Australia and spent several years surfing, building surfboards, and teaching young Australians how to ride waves. He became one of the pioneers of surfing in Australia, introducing the sport to areas where it was previously unknown. In the 1960s, Jack returned to England. He took up a new hobby, riding the Severn boar. The Severn boar is a tidal phenomenon in the River Severn in England, a wave caused by the incoming tide surging up the river. It's one of the longest surfable waves in the world, traveling for miles upriver. Jack Churchill became the first person to successfully surf the Severn boar. He did it at age 59. He continued surfing the Severn boar into his 70s. Jack Churchill spent his retirement years in Surrey, England, with his wife Rosamund. They had married in 1941 and had 2 sons. He lived in a modest home, tended a garden, and pursued various hobbies. But he never lost his eccentricity. Every day, Jack commuted by train to London. Every day, without fail, he threw his briefcase out the train window as they approached his home station. "Why?" he explained. "I throw my briefcase out the window every day so it lands in my garden. That way, I don't have to carry it home from the station." His neighbors thought he was insane. His family thought he was hilarious. Jack didn't care what anyone thought. He also kept his sword and longbow. Visitors to his home would find them mounted on the wall, along with his bagpipes, his military cross, his Distinguished Service Order, and photographs from the war. When asked about his wartime exploits, Jack would downplay them. "I was just doing my job." Any officer would have done the same. When pressed about why he carried a sword and longbow into combat, he'd say, "Because they're more civilized than guns. If you're going to kill someone, you should at least look them in the eye." Jack Churchill lived to the age of 89. He died on March 8, 1996, in Surrey, England, of natural causes. He was surrounded by family. His obituary in the Times of London read, Lieutenant Colonel John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, DSO and Bar, MC and Bar, the last British soldier to kill an enemy with a longbow, a warrior out of time. The story of Mad Jack Churchill raises profound questions about courage, eccentricity, and what it means to be a warrior. On weapons and warfare, Jack Churchill's insistence on carrying medieval weapons into modern combat seems insane, but his reasoning was consistent. Modern war had become impersonal. You could kill someone from a mile away with artillery, from 10,000 feet with a bomb. You never saw their face. Jack believed that if you're going to kill someone, you should face them, look them in the eye, give them a chance to fight back. His sword and longbow were statements. I'm here. I see you. Let's fight honorably. In a war filled with mass murder and industrial killing, Jack's medieval weapons were a protest against dehumanization. On fear and courage, Jack Churchill was either fearless or insane, possibly both. He charged machine gun nests playing bagpipes. He escaped from concentration camps. He complained when wars ended. But his courage wasn't mindless bravery. Jack survived because he was competent. He knew tactics, understood terrain, trained obsessively. His eccentricity distracted from the fact that he was an exceptional soldier. The bagpipes and sword made him memorable, but his skill kept him alive. On eccentricity and effectiveness, the British military had thousands of competent, professional officers. Most followed regulations, dressed properly, carried standard weapons. Jack Churchill broke every rule and was more effective than almost any of them. His captures of 42 Germans multiple times proved that unconventional tactics could work. His raid succeeded because he did things Germans didn't expect. His survival proved that sometimes a crazy plan is the best plan. On war and purpose, Jack Churchill loved war. Not violence, not killing, war. He thrived in the structure, the challenge, the intensity of combat. When wars ended, he was bored. This disturbs modern sensibilities. We're taught that war is hell, that everyone wants peace. But some people are built for war. They find meaning in combat that they can't find elsewhere. Jack was honest about this, which made people uncomfortable. But his honesty was refreshing. He didn't pretend to be a reluctant hero. He was a willing warrior. On living authentically, Mad Jack Churchill refused to be anyone but himself. He played bagpipes when everyone told him to stop. He carried a sword when regulations said no. He surfed when he was 70. He threw briefcases out train windows. He lived exactly as he wanted, ignoring social pressure, military regulations, and common sense. His life was a testament to the power of authenticity. Be who you are, unapologetically, and the world will accommodate you. The final assessment of Mad Jack Churchill. Jack Churchill was a last warrior, a man who belonged in the Middle Ages but was born in the 20th century. He fought modern wars with medieval weapons and somehow survived. His combat record is extraordinary. Dozens of successful raids, hundreds of enemies killed or captured, 2 escapes from German captivity, decorations for valor. He proved that one eccentric officer with sword and bagpipes could accomplish more than entire companies of conventional soldiers. But his real legacy isn't his kill count or his captures. It's his refusal to let modernity rob war of its honor. In an age of machine guns, bombs, and genocide, Jack Churchill insisted on fighting face-to-face, with weapons that required skill and courage. He treated war as a personal contest between warriors, not industrial slaughter of masses. He was the last of the warrior class, the last man to go into battle believing that honor, courage, and personal combat still mattered. After Jack Churchill, there were no more warriors, only soldiers. May 14, 1944. Yugoslavia. A British officer sits on a stone wall, surrounded by dead comrades, encircled by German soldiers. He raises his bagpipes to his lips and plays. The Germans hold their fire, confused, uncertain, afraid. When the music ends, the officer stands, surrenders, and is taken prisoner. 9 months later, he escapes from a concentration camp, walks 150 miles through enemy territory, and returns to Allied lines. When the war ends, he complains that it ended too soon. That is Mad Jack Churchill, the warrior who brought swords and arrows to a world of machine guns and bombs. The Commando who played bagpipes while Germans shot at him. The Eccentric who threw briefcases out train windows. The last true warrior of the modern age. John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, 1906 to 1996. Lieutenant Colonel. Distinguished Service Order and Bar. Military Cross and Bar. The only British soldier to carry a sword, longbow, and bagpipes into battle in World War II. Any officer who goes into action without a sword is improperly dressed. Rest in peace, Mad Jack. The war ended, but your legend never will.